All right, so this is the briefing video for the meeting on the 12th of December 2022. And meeting obviously starting out like normal, call to order, invocation, and pledge of allegiance, roll call, approval of agenda, approval of past meeting minutes, treasurer's report, paying the bills, fire department report. This next one is a different step. We have a new firefighter that we will approve conditionally, I assume, that the board will approve, and already coming to us with firefighter and medical training, which is great because it means he'll just have to get up to speed on our equipment and our things here, and he'll be ready to roll, which is wonderful. You know, we can definitely use it. Next, we have the Planning Commission report, and then we have the Maintenance and Grounds report, and this is new. So I think it makes sense to have that in the meeting so people can see some of what's happening. Nate wrote that up, and I think he's a little nervous about presenting it at the meeting, so I might just read it off. But nevertheless, it's in the packet for people to view. Next, we have our first public comment section on agenda items, 3 minutes. And then we have our decision items. We have the 2023 Board and Planning Commission meeting dates. So in those, 2 of the Planning Commission dates are moved for our holidays, for Halloween and Christmas. They're adjusted for. And so that can be debated and changed verbally if the board wants to on any of those things. But otherwise, they seem decent. Same with the next item, the 2023 holiday dates. And there are a couple there, just like last year, that could be debated, and so it can swing different ways, but it's written up in a reasonable way, I think. Next, we have the land sale request for Russell Road, so that's a new one, step 1. And then we have the land sale proposal for East Daniel, so that's step 2, where we're establishing a minimum bid because we collected comparables from the one realtor and then the true cash value from the assessing department. Next, we have moving the credit limit of the township to $20,000. This is because in a previous meeting, we added a credit card up to $5,000 for maintenance, which makes sense because they go out and get things. And if we have an account, it works out wonderfully at some of the local hardware stores, Ace and Craig's and that type of thing, and then they just bill us. But if it's something different than that and we have to go further, it doesn't necessarily make sense to establish an account everywhere, but you still want to get the stuff without delay. So he would borrow it from either the clerk or the treasurer, but it makes sense for him to just have it available. We passed that at $5,000. I assumed the bank would understand to increase the overall amount from having 3 at 15 to 4 at 20, and they didn't. so we have to pass a thing that says, yes, we're 4 times 5, we want 20. Next, we have 2 board review appointments. Now, these are reappointments. We saw them in the last meeting because I wanted to take care of all those appointments that are coming up near the end of their terms and get them all accomplished ahead of time. All the other ones are fine. With these, there's a specific state statute that says for the board of review, you have to be sworn in within 10 days of the board vote. It's the only one that's like that. And so they're not, these 2 people, Craig and Wanda, they're not at the end of the terms, and so I figured it would work out well. Just get it approved last month. We'll just swear them in at the board review meeting here in December, but it's more than 10 days, so it doesn't work logistically, so it makes sense to do this on Monday. They can be sworn in for the new term, which doesn't start until January, at the December meeting. Next, we have Ordinance 2022-09 for a rezoning. That went through the Planning Commission, now it's coming to the board. And then we have Ordinance 2022-07 for local food sovereignty. We've been discussing and debating that one for a while. I included the full one in here, and we'll have that as a vote. Next, as discussion items, we have maintenance, grounds, and DPW comparables. We had talked about potentially moving this to salary. I figured it would make sense when we're doing a quarterly budget adjustment in January if we did something like that. The board had brought up doing comparables for other places. A difficult thing to do because it's a different context and there's different ways that the other municipalities operate. So it's a bit of apples to oranges. And I mean, that can fluctuate quite a bit. Even you have somewhere larger like Muskegon Charter Township where they plow roads and they do trash pickup on a circuit and they handle sewer, and I think they handle some water, but they don't have any cemeteries, right? You have other places where they actually do the cemetery burials. It's all over the place. The places with Department of Public Works often have more of that stuff. They have like road plowing, sewer, water. Here, we largely haven't had that. It's the 4 parks, the horse trail, the bike trail, the 2 cemeteries, the grounds here, and then various other odds and ends things. Snow plowing ends up being big for the parking lots in the winter, grass and leaves for the rest of the year, and general maintenance on the buildings, these types of things, keeping the vehicles in good working order. We really should have sewer inspections, and I got a sewer hook. I have it sitting in the corner over here. Bought this for me to do sewer inspections because they weren't being done, but we don't even have a correct general map that we can find of the sewer. We have individual plans for individual sections, so working on that. I've gone around and done a few with the previous head of the Department of Public Works for the county. Found one issue along the section coming north off of M120, but it's technically on a private part that ties into the main municipal part. So that's a thing. But nevertheless, we don't have the equipment to like flush lines or anything like that. So it's different for all these places, and it fluctuates quite a lot. So by the per hour charge or the yearly salary between all of these different places and all of the different duties they do and the different amount of personnel, some have a dozen employees in the Department of Public Works. And so I included a bunch of the municipalities from the supervisors and various city managers and things like that to consider for next month. Next, we have eliminating the ORV registration. And so this was brought up, it was even in the initial discussions, like if we're not inspecting the vehicles, why are we doing a registration? Now, this was brought up a couple of months ago, from a guy that was emailing me, and I think he inquired before too, and he was talking about liability of the township. And so I checked with the lawyer, and the lawyer said, government immunity, the people are responsible as individuals, and they're supposed to have their own insurance and be following the various laws, and if they're not, that's on them. But by registering the vehicles, you could be making the statement that we're saying this vehicle can be out there, even though we don't do inspections, and I don't think it makes sense for us to do inspections. And if you get a registration just at the township, you still have to get the ORV sticker through the state too. Now, our registration is also a waiver and release of liability, so I think we're good on that end. And if we move away from the registration of them, which it's hard to say that it serves an important function, so it probably makes sense. I thought about leaving it as is for a while, as a process, as a political process to end up with what we had, and then if there were no issues with the registration, which I don't see how our registration would really help with anything, and then probably just move away from it anyways. But as this guy brought it up in the emails again, I wanted to check on him a little more. And the lawyer does recommend just eliminating the registration portion of the ordinance. So it may make sense for us to just do that over the winter, and then that way next spring people have to get their stickers from the state and that type of thing, but otherwise they're just good to go. So I want to discuss that. Next, we have cemetery ordinance. So there's a little discrepancy here because it's on the agenda, but I don't have anything in the packet on it. And that's because I keep notes on various problems and issues we're having, things that should be changed, things that I want to tackle in some way. And we've had various issues at the cemetery. And I mean, this is the entire time I've been in. There have been various issues at the cemetery. One of the main issues is the company that we actually have do the burials. We've had several issues with them. And I've looked for competitors. There aren't any. And that's a major issue. So at that point, it's either we have to get all the equipment and bring it in-house with more people for full burials, or we kind of have to keep going through them. This last one was about laying in a piece of cement for a headstone, and it was hugely delayed, and there was miscommunication about if the payment had gone through and this type of thing. And so I thought some changes might make sense to make in the ordinance to try to make that function better. I think there's definite limitations there, especially because we can't just shift to a competitor for the burials. So there's definite limitations, but I thought it might make sense to review this. Tracy, and it's going through the clerk's office, all the coordination for the cemeteries. And so I connected with her and I was like, hey, I've got this on the list of a thing that could make sense for us to review. Do you want to tackle it? And she said, she's got a bunch of other stuff she's dealing with. The clerk's office is always very busy. And so she was like, I'm not going to get to a review of if anything should change in the ordinance at this point. And I said, I'll eliminate it. And I took a piece of paper, which I believe I threw away now. I get multiple working sheets of paper for an agenda and then go through and change things as I'm going. I drew a line from it to cross it out, but didn't actually erase it in the version that ended up printed on here. So that's why it's on here. Could be good to have a light discussion on it anyways. We'll just mention it, but nothing happening at this time as far as I can tell. But that's why it's on here and nothing's in the packet, is because I intended to erase it and probably circle back around to it later, but just forgot to hit the back button on that one. Next, we have real estate bidding escalation clause. And obviously, we've done a bunch of real estate sales since I've been in to try to shore up the finances of the township and not have to make huge budget cuts to then cover the debt for the sewer that wasn't able to be paid and those types of things. And that is working out well. But one of the normal processes in some of the real estate bidding is to include an escalation clause. And I was warned against it by the Laura when we were adapting this policy before, which we've done a couple of times since I've been in to try to make it work decent. And we're up to the way it works in 3 meetings now. We have 2 at 2 different points in the process in this meeting alone. And I think it could make sense because, the lawyer had said, well, it gets messy if you do the escalation clause and they can get complex sometimes. But we should, because they're sealed bids, when I get envelopes, I stick them in a spot and then I take them to the meeting, I slice them, I pull them out. I don't know what's in there. And so we have had some surprising things written into the bidding. And so I can't stop someone from writing an escalation clause in there. We could make a policy that we just reject bids that have escalation clauses. Or we could say that we accept escalation clauses and we'll go with escalation clause, or we could say that we'll take the bid but not as an escalation clause and just count your lowest bid as the bid, or that we'll take the bid but not count it as escalation and just take the highest bid. But it would make sense for the township board to make a decision on how they're going to treat the escalation clause. Now, when one of those sales is before the board, the board of trustees has the authority to accept or reject bids as long as they're not contradicting themselves. So if we set a minimum, then we have to stick with that minimum. But other than that, the board can accept or reject any bid for any reason that it wants. But it would make sense to have a normal practice moving forward at least and determine which way to go on that so people know what to write in their bids and then they can still fluctuate from that, but ideally they would stick with that. Next, we have road projects, and this can be more of a general discussion. The road commission had a meeting of the supervisors trying to get paving projects and coordinate things to bid them out as a larger unit like the county does so that they can get a better price. And which makes a lot of sense. We've got one petition that the board accepted. The road commission is working on getting me numbers for that paving of the portion of Central Road. I know the special assessments are still dealing with some fallout of difficulties with calculations and complaints on Michelinda, and still not paying it. I'm not sure when the road commission is going to put the lines on there. And I know someone did some graffiti on there. I've had people thank me, call and thank, or send messages thanking me about being willing to go through the process, the clunky process on Michelinda, and I've also had people yell at me and complain and stuff like that, and yell at other people in the office as well. And so I know they're not the greatest thing, but nevertheless, if the township just out of the budget paid for a paving project, that could eat a huge amount or all of the road budget for 1 year for a small section of paving, and then we don't have any money to work with the county on anything else on like the gravel or dirt roads, which we have somewhere around 27 miles of dirt roads, so it's a lot. And I mean, complaints roll in on every mile of dirt and gravel road throughout the township throughout the year, right? It's a continuous thing. I might, on average, talk to the road commission. Well, I have to do at least one message a day on average, right? I mean, sometimes it's a bunch of messages in the same day, but so it's a lot, and it's mostly on those. Sometimes there's signage issues, stuff like that. We've interesting trying to get those signs taken care of for the railroad crossing projects. But we've got that one paving project. And so if anyone else wants to take up the initiative of doing a petition for a special assessment for paving, I think that makes sense. It's not a fun process for getting it through and all the paperwork and getting the lawyers to write up the documents and then going through the hearings and the notices and then getting the treasurer to put it on the rolls and all of that type of stuff. So it's a major logistical issue as far as all of that is considered. But the road commission did say that some of those dirt roads up by the lakes where there's a decent density of houses and the roads are fairly short might make sense to pave those, and I think that's reasonable. But otherwise, for the amount of money we're putting into it, and I'm hoping maybe $200,000, maybe $250,000, somewhere in there, that we can get in the 2023 budget for roads, can go through to a lot of the pass-through roads, the drive-through roads for gravel and dirt roads, because they get traffic not necessarily from the area. We also have dirt roads that are bad, that are dead ends, and so you just get the people that live on those roads, and try to get work done on those as well. So, but we have to determine where it would make the most sense to allocate funds. And obviously, I want to be really open to the recommendations from the Road Commission because they know quite a bit about those specific processes as well. So, I wanted to have the discussion on that. Next, we have the Spark grant. And these are grants coming down from the state for parks and those types of things. Christy has looked into it and followed up with it, and she got a quote from Fleece and Vandenbrink about what it would take for them to draw up the documentation to apply for the Spark grant. And I have a reference packet as well with the complete plans, and then in the board packet itself, just the email from the guy. And it's $15,000 to end up drawing up the documents, because you have to have specific documents, specific designs, architectural designs drawn up to apply for it. And if you're awarded the grant, then that can be covered in there. If you're not awarded the grant, then you're just out that money. So it ends up being a weird spot. You know, I disagree with this grant-based society where the basic structure is that money starts in the highest level of government and then it trickles down, right? The trickle down money thing is horrible in multiple different ways. But nevertheless, we obviously don't have it in our authority to change the laws that the state and federal Congress does in their types of appropriations. So we're stuck at our level of decision making, which is on this, whether to apply for it or not apply for it, whether to risk those funds or not. So that's the decision there. I want to see people's thoughts on it. Next, we have the enforcement ordinance, and we're on a second version of resolution for due process in the enforcement, and I think that is working well. You know, this was really driven home for me over the last few days, especially yesterday. I was a bit angry over this yesterday, in that I think everyone probably knows Kevin McCabe. He's come to meetings, made a bunch of stuff. Years ago, they had a thing filed against him saying he couldn't come into the building unless there was official duty, and he just trolls around and causes issues. He's known throughout municipalities, apparently in the county, for doing that. And I'm probably I've been the nicest government official, if I had to guess, that's ever worked with him to get him all the information he wanted instead of making him FOIA request it and stuff. Because, hey, it's public information. I'll get it together. He wanted the tax record cards, which are public information. And so I spent hours and hours generating all those reports myself and sending them to him because he wanted to compare his property to other people and make sure he was getting taxed appropriately, which, fair enough. But turns out, he's a bad faith operator. And so how he's actually now because he got denied for a principal resident exemption, he's going around, and apparently anyone that lives near me or anyone that might be associated with me, he's trying to turn them in for any building code violations or zoning violations, which everyone does some violations. That's one of the issues with our society, where you have so many laws that no one can know them all and no one can follow them all, so everyone's violating some stuff. So you can get someone like this, and this was a huge issue in East Germany, where up to maybe 1/3 of the population were government informants. So everyone's always informing on each other, right? And that's what McCabe is doing. So, but he's attempting to use it as like a coercion type of thing. So he's going to go inform on people that I might be connected to, and then try to coerce me into illegally giving him a tax exemption or something like that. Obviously not going to work on me. But you have bad people, and you have good people, and then you have most people, right? And most people are in the middle of that. And you've got a few percent, literally few percent. If you look at Police Reserve Battalion 101 going into Poland is a great example, 2.4%, right? That they have a very strong conscience that won't be broken down. It's very small. But you probably have that same number on the other side that are bad, right? They're just bad. They just want to hurt people in whatever way they can. They want to do damage in some way, right? Out of some version of resentment, something like this. And so, but if you increase the people with good conscience just by a few percent, the society significantly improves, right? But if you increase the people that are bad over here by just a few percent, the society significantly goes down. And so it's some of these extremes of just a few percent of people that, whether they're good intentioned or ill intentioned, makes a huge difference in society. But it's more damaging to have bad people with power than it is to have good people without power, right? And so the power should be limited. That is the logical conclusion. That makes the most sense. This is the moral case for limited government, because you can get bad people that try to use the system in this case, right? So McCabe is trying to use the laws to do bad things, which is not and should not be the spirit of the laws. So even if we have too many laws and laws are too oppressing, that still shouldn't be the spirit of the laws, and we should be able to attempt to be working it the other way, which is what I'm trying to do in my reforms. You should also do it at a reasonable pace, right? But it just drove home this, it's an important lesson. It's a good reminder. It drove home this lesson of due process in the enforcement ordinance is immensely important, just because of people like that. I don't know if everyone would take the pressure of attempting to be coerced, right, by someone like trying to go after someone they know, something like that. I mean, how many people stand up to that versus how many people give in, right, to someone like McCabe, and they're like, okay, I'll do what you say, and that's dangerous, right? That's very dangerous. And so I think it's very important. Due process is very important. It's one of the most important foundations of civilization itself. In the modern era, really came about in the Magna Carta in 1215. Due process was used for the first time in English in a version of the Magna Carta in the 1300s. Very important. Next, and so I want to have a discussion over that and then move it into the actual process for putting it in as an ordinance, now that we've worked out some of the kinks in the resolutions. Next, we have Age Well Services reports. Now, I would have put them at the beginning near where some of the other reports are, but Chris is coming from a different meeting, and I know, in her email, she was saying, she could rush here. She might be able to be here by like 6:15, but I didn't necessarily want her to have to rush and that type of thing. And I think, it's a negative thing, right? And we're just talking about a negative thing, but it's also a positive thing, just like that as well, right? So it's like negative that people try to get back at people through using the government, but we're doing a good thing because we're trying to design a process to protect against that. This too. So we gave money to Safe Seniors, which AgeWell operates, for going after people that try to scam senior citizens in Dalton Township. And so, which is, fraud is an immense thing, and immensely important to try to stop and prevent and discourage for a society to be able to function correctly with truth in their contracts, right? And what they represent and what they're going to do for what you're going to pay them, right? And that's a difficult balance to keep sometimes, but we have immense amount of scammers, and a lot of them go after senior citizens. So this was the first year that the township put money towards that. This is from the senior millage, right? We did money towards snow plowing. If people wanted to sign up through that, through the Living Word nonprofit organization. Or, and then the other half, basically, the money that was left over, we sent to Safe Seniors. And a number of people in Dalton Township have received services through that to pursue these senior citizen scammers. And so there's a report on that. So it'll be a nice, good thing to end the meeting on as well. So it kind of works out decently in that way. And then we have the public board comment, and then we move into the adjournment. In the reference packet, so I included the Spark grant application proposal, and so because decent amount of documentation, I think this time my board packet is actually larger than my reference packet, which a lot of times that's reversed. But some good stuff in here. So the Spark grant application proposal is in here. The East Daniels comparable market analysis is in here. I think I included one page of the comparables as kind of a summary in the regular board packet, but I included the full thing in the reference packet in case anyone wants to look at it. I included the ORV ordinance, since we're talking about that. I included the enforcement resolution that we're currently working with and so because we're talking about that. And then I included an essay on man's lust for power by John Adams, which is wonderful. And he also referred to it as self-deceit. And he even made a comment later in life, because he had written that decently young, that his entire life had been working on the ideas in there. And it's only 2 pages, and it was not published in his lifetime. And, it's his life philosophy and the meaning that he took from working in politics, which he did an immense amount, few not great things, but an immense amount of good things as well. And so a very, very important essay, I think, in the history of the United States and America and freedom in general, and the way checks and balances work and the separation of powers. So, and only 2 pages, kind of cool, and it wasn't published, which is very interesting. So if anything else, good, bad, indifferent, feel free to reach out. My direct line at the office is area code 231-332-6700 or email supervisor@daltontownship.org. Until next time, this is Jeff signing off.